Before we dive into a string of new long-form video essays, let's take a couple videos to mix stuff up. This video is the first in a pair, and fear not, because if this topic isn't what you're really looking for, the video dropping in a day or two will hopefully hold a more general appeal. But as it is, it's Pride Month, and I'm a gay, and through that lens I've experienced what it's like to hear a few punk bands discuss those sorts of things on a few songs of their catalog. And following that desire for more content like that, and the disappointment in finding most bands in the punk pseudo-mainstream usually turn their focus on other issues, leaving the gay stuff to be an occasional feature. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. They get to discuss whatever they want to discuss in their music, but it can be frustrating or irksome to people who are brought closer or further into punk because of those themes, only to find the well of easily accessible content dry up very quickly. So today I'll go over a handful of punk bands who regularly discuss LGBTQ+ themes. Some of them are pretty large, some of them pretty obscure, but the goal here is to just share bands in the sphere who I enjoy, and want more people to know about in case y'all might enjoy them too. And in addition to official site links, I'll also include a playlist in the top comment below with a few songs from each artist featured. So, here goes. Sheherhers is an act out of Michigan, sometimes a solo outing by lead vocalist Emma, and sometimes a full band effort, and just to be straight up, it's my second favorite band in this video. Obviously I like every band here for their own merits, but Sheherhers is the second most my thing. At its core, a sound not unsimilar to Midwest emo, with that strummy but careful and lighter but sometimes ferocious picking. The bass is careful and deliberate, not super showy but very effective. Some sharp, clean, and light electric guitar that just gives you that fresh, rejuvenated feeling. And of course that coarse and passionate but not technically great singing. Above all, Sheherhers packs frank, honest, and direct lyrics, disarmingly so. Some punk musicians like to get poetic or theatrical, but Emma's lyrics cut to the chase in an admirable way. All of these elements in this framework isn't super inventive, but together they pull it off really well. Add on top of that solid foundation, their EP Kill the Boy Band from last year pulled out all of the ska stops. It's packed with gratuitous brass and fronted with an absolute bop. That EP was so fucking solid and so good with its fearless brass implementation, the saxophone solo. They pack a lot of passion and fun, and a healthy bit of musical intrigue and skills. Warriors are by far the most musically mainstream-sounding band on this list, and that's not an insult, more like in another time or in a hypothetical parallel universe where hip-hop and electronica aren't the genres, I could see them going places. They have a fun classic bass and guitar that evoke a cleaner Sweet or a more traditional Bowie or a poppier Kinks, and they can apply this to classic 70s smooth jams, to classic pop-punky bops. They're fun. To say it in a boomer way, they have that groove that you can dance to, and despite the obvious influence, much like the Smith Street Band, another act I love, but of course in their own way, they're able to keep up so much of that intensity and fun little spontaneity that I don't hesitate to consider them a pop-punk band at the least. They're fun and infectious, though something to note about them is that they've had kind of a rotating door of members. Lots of people popped in and out of the project, and for the more instrumentally minded, I can see if you kind of get a little frustrated when you like how one member clicks, only for them to be gone by the next album. And despite everyone coming on and off, they keep consistent sound pretty well, but, you know, it's something to note. Onsid, or Onsid, I'll say Onsid. Onsid is a pretty straight-up Midwest emo folk-punk thing out of England. They have a very similar approach to energy and hostile playing under lighter mastering and vibe, evoking Andrew Jackson Jihad's softer mastered stuff. They then add a twanginess and kind of spangliness, similar to some of Days and Days' stuff, and of course tie that all together with their own identity. You could say that they don't do a whole lot to differentiate themselves from those acts, but to me, from my perspective, it's more, if you like those two bands, it's very likely that you might like this one. Their English identity is aggressive, and it saturates the music, and they're all around a gentler but very instrumentally similar band. The lyrics get a little more poetic, for good and bad, and the music can go to much more theatrical and melodic places, but yet can still be very cutting and frank. They tie the folk identity of the region very tightly to their music, and that helps differentiate them a lot. They're also one of the more political acts on this list, and if that's something you like, there you go. Making lists like this, I feel somewhat obligated to include Against Me. They're certainly one of the biggest bands tackling LGBTQ+ issues head-on in their music, but in case they've flown under anyone's radar, Against Me is a Florida punk band formed in 1997. In the beginning, they were very strongly folk punk, and wrote a lot of classics in certain circles, like Baby I'm an Anarchist, before going on to explore a more general punk sound. In 2014, they released a sort of loose concept album, Trans Dysphoria Blues, and vocalist Laura started her campaign to directly platform trans voices in music. I think, unfortunately, Laura's ambitions and plans outside of the music and the band's strong established sound before this experimentation leading into this album both kind of accidentally conspire to take away from this record itself. Here, the punk band embrace a very Queers-esque, hard-hazed, melodic surf pop punk thing, and I think that they do it very well. For LGBTQ plus issues, it might be the most heavy-handed album in this video, if only because it's clear some of the language here was chosen, at least in part, to be more understandable to people who know little or nothing about trans people. Like, for some of the albums on this list, it would probably just leave the average, non-gay knowledgeable person thinking, what do these words mean? Like, binaries, gender construct, cis, what does that mean? But a lot of the songs on Trans Blues go to tap into a more basic human rawness, to draw on that near universal human empathy. Like, that's cool, I respect that. So I'd more strongly recommend this record to allies, or to people just beginning to explore identity, because for the most part it does end up feeling more like a story, like a two-dimensional thing rather than a three. Laura knew the broad audience that she wanted to reach with this record, and she took the best approach for that, and I respect the hell out of her for making this record the way she did to do what she wanted to do. But if you're already at the point where you're hungry for some next level stuff in music, this might be a little too simple or beginning. Like, if that makes sense. It's earned its place as that one album that's very obviously trans, and I respect it for that. But I also encourage that if you want to find trans themes, you might be surprised how much you can find before she was publicly trans in some of the older material. So I'd say that while Trans Dysphoria Blues definitely tackles LGBTQ issues the most directly and head-on, if you're looking for music that might satisfy that, you might be better off listening to albums here more based out of the musical sound that you're looking for than necessarily the directness of the message, because there's still a lot to like, and there's still a wonderful band apart from all of the LGBTQ stuff that she tackles very strongly on this release. If Warriors calls to a 70s sound, the Spook School fully embraces that thing and takes it where they want to go. Spook School remind me a lot in ways of the Buzzcocks or of the Kinks, of that proto-punk goodness with their popping but simpler bass lines and more raw but still classically melodic guitar, and impactful, fast, and fun drum lines. Nonetheless, while they're a little weirder than Warriors, they're a lot more low-key, more just vibin'. They tackle a lot of LGBTQ plus stuff head-on, unapologetically, but they're very bubbly and fun about it. Not to say they can't be confrontational, but even when so, they're cheery in tone. Like, one of the biggest takeaways from the Spook School, the hot take, the elevator pitch, is while their sound could easily fall into punk, their vibe is so unapologetically cheesy and bubbly and hyper-poppy, like 60s cheesy sunshine. Like, they do it well. But some of you might find it abrasive, and I get it if you do. Porch Cat are certainly the most unique band in their sound in this list, and naturally that'll make them not everyone's cup of tea. Melodically, they evoke an 80s, airy pop, almost sometimes borderline vaporwave-esque thing with the voice lines and parts and flow, with some synth drums and shit, but undertowed with a sick bass and incredibly hazed-out guitar. In this distorted, daydream-like vibe, they roll out some traditional, old-school pop-punk song structures, guitar lines, and general energy. This adds up to reminding me a lot of the Bangles in energy, but achieved through some shockingly different means. Porch Cat are technically not what people would always consider punk in their sound, but to me they channel a very similar energy, if not a punk energy exactly, through my biased opinion. They also have a lot of acoustic and more traditional folk punk stuff, which is a lot more familiar but nonetheless carries the same bold persona. While they feel like they have a decent bit of growing up to do, I really dig the basic energy and identity at play with the band's instrumentals and melody. I'm honestly just super excited to see where they take this. Like, a harmonizing of the two sounds or a new evolution would be dope as hell, and I generally can't wait for more. Human People are a band I love a lot, and they might be my favorite band on this list. I've been waiting for a chance to call attention to them again. Butterflies Drink Turtle Tears is in retrospect grown to be one of my favorite releases from 2018. Their sound is like discordious, distraught, this almost pained but nonetheless catchy and hazy, smooth surf pop punk. The vocalist Haley brings a perfect raw, unwieldy caterwaul, along with the sharp-toned, deep-bassed, washed-out surf sound. They all muster up to this attitude of being anxious and vulnerable, but also confident and self-assured. It reminds me of what Diet Sig accomplishes, only a lot more cocky and traditionally punkin' attitude by the end. And while I wouldn't ever classify it as cutesy like the other surfy band I love, I do find it deeply endearing. Their songs are longer, highly atmospheric, and flow together nicely. They're totally a band to just sit back and give yourself to their vibe and let it carry you gently away like all great music in the spirit of surf strives to do. And the last band I picked for this list are Sapphic Musk, an all-female band with strong punk roots, especially in attitude and approach to bouncy low bass, but blended with a horror rock melody and atmosphere, and all thrown in with a general hard rock thing, and tied together on top with big theatricality. Strictly speaking, I don't know if you'd find them more on the punk side or on the side of their other influences, like the horror rock, hard rock, theatrical stuff, but I figured it was worth including them. They're that spooky, melodic hard rock that's just super earwormy and easy to listen to and pretty pretty surprisingly melodic, even if not obsessively original. Like, if you're looking for a new general rock album to throw on, why not a band of lesbian Viking punks? And as a sort of additional extra thing, at the end of that playlist, if you check it out, there's a song called Flirting With Her by an artist called Sir Baby Girl. And I consider this kind of an additional bonus thing, because they're definitely not an artist that I generally consider punk. The song that I've included is the closest to punk that they've gotten, and that's still pretty far. They have synthesized drum beats and large reliance on electronica. They're pretty much your general modern pop band with that. And that won't be everyone's cup of tea clicking on a video for punk bands. But I still think that they're worth checking out simply for that persona and energy. It's something that I think fans of punk might be able to enjoy and get into, even if musically it's very different. It's worth a shot. This was just a short little video, and those were just a few bands which I both enjoy and hope show a wide variety in genre and style, but rest assured they're just the tip of a much larger iceberg. There are plenty more LGBTQ+ punk bands beyond these few, and I hope this just serves as a good starting point to getting into them, finding bands related to them, meeting fans who can help you from here, all of that good stuff. If you know of a solid LGBTQ+ punk band, then feel free to drop a comment below. Otherwise, to any gay punks watching, happy Pride Month and keep being you.